A House committee passes a bill requiring notice that medical marijuana card holders cannot legally own firearms. That's right. South Dakota medical marijuana dispensaries would be required to add an acknowledgement on applications for cannabis that the user could not legally purchase or own firearms or ammunition under federal law if they have a card. While medical cannabis is legal in South Dakota and many other states, federal law still classifies all marijuana as a Schedule I drug with no medical use and being highly addictive. The House Judiciary Committee passed HB 1024 11 to 0 this morning, basically on Friday morning. The committee also passed a companion bill, HB 1036, requiring dispensaries to post a notice about the federal restriction. That vote was 8-4 in favor of the measure. Republican Representative Kevin Jensen from Canton sponsored both bills. Jensen teaches gun safety and courses for concealed pistol permits. The bill, HB 1024, only requires an additional statement on the medical marijuana card about firearms, and Jensen said, "It's an acknowledgement. Then it's up to the consumer." Jensen compared the notice to posting speed limits. Cannabis Industry Association lobbyist Jeremiah Murphy spoke against both measures. He said federal courts are still considering the constitutionality of the federal government's position on medical marijuana, and he said there are federal laws that say the federal government cannot interfere with medical marijuana. The federal law means what it means, Murphy testified. You can't interfere with medical marijuana at the program or individual level. There was some opposition, however, to the bill requiring dispensaries to post that having a medical marijuana card legally procures firearm purchases or ownership, and some committee members felt the posting requirement was too much interference in an already heavily regulated industry. The bill would also provide a $250 a day fine on dispensaries that fail to post the notice. Both measures now move to the House of Representatives for consideration. Well, I'll tell you what, this guy is definitely, I'm not going to consider him a constitutionalist because he is trying to step all over your Second Amendment right, Representative Kevin Jensen out of South Dakota, and I represent any South Dakotans' move to get this guy out of office and replace him with someone else. But nonetheless, that's just my thoughts, and what do you guys have to say? This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do you think?
Get him out of here.
Right?
Get out of here.
I mean, $250 a day, too, for not posting a sign saying that you are not constitutionally legal to purchase or own a firearm if you're a cannabis consumer. I never read anywhere in the Constitution that if you use cannabis that procures you from owning a firearm.
I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to say I'm pretty sure the Constitution was written on cannabis. Bam! How about that, buddy?
I don't think it actually was.
You took my line.
I don't think it actually was. That's a misnomer.
The original drafts were done on hemp. Now the one that you see in the National Archives, yes, is not on hemp. But the original drafts were.
There we go.
But is this Jason actually checking facts?
I'm the biggest fact checker I know.
Oh my God!
Listen, in Washington used to require you to grow a certain number of acreage of hemp if you grew a certain acreage of any agricultural product.
Right. That's right. It's very, very true, yeah. Nick. You were actually during World War II. You were actually frowned upon if you were a farmer and you weren't cultivating hemp. Like there was, you were shunned amongst the farming community.
It was unpatriotic.
Mm-hmm. Virginia. Yeah, and in Virginia, man, they had a law against like owning a certain amount of land and not growing hemp on that land.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when slavery fell apart and white people realized that they weren't that good at growing cannabis, what happened then, Jason? Prohibition came.
That is not how that started, Rico. That is one of your anecdotal little skirts.
I mean, this whole thing troubles me, okay? Because we do, as a country, need to have a conversation about gun rights, the Second Amendment, the dependent clause, and we have a major issue when it comes to typically young men shooting up schools. And we also talk about the stigma leaving regulated cannabis, and the stigma doesn't leave regulated cannabis until cannabis users can have the same Second Amendment rights that the rest of the country has.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this country is long overdue to have a robust discussion about modernizing our understanding of what the Second Amendment means. And I think in some places that might mean, like, if you're under 25 and your brain is still physically developing, that you might not get access to a 30-round magazine or an AR-15. But I also think that it means that when we think about expungement for cannabis felons, that we acknowledge that if they don't get their Second Amendment rights back, unless they get a pardon from the governor, that that's not fair either. And so this notion that access to firearms can be restricted because of access to cannabis is just crazy. It's crazy to begin with, and it's definitely crazy in 2024. And there's just no data to support this connection that cannabis use and irresponsible firearm use are connected in any way. And so it just really feels like a relic policy that is unfair to people who like guns and to people who like weed.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think. Go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say that I think they're two separate arguments. I think there's an argument about the Second Amendment and what that looks like in practicality, in reality, in 2024. And then there's also restricting people from any amendment in the Bill of Rights for any reason. We have to be really careful when we do that, right? There's a reason why we included a 10 Amendment Bill of Rights to the end of the Constitution, because we thought it was so important for people to have. So when you start creating prohibitions and restrictions on those rights, you have to be very, very careful, because it's a slippery slope now. Look where we are hundreds of years, a couple hundred years later, to where now it's not every American has a right to bear arms, right? Only certain Americans do. And then let me go ahead and check you off the list if you've done anything that I think is wrong or not good. Now, you're right. We do have an issue with guns and schools and all those things. But I think that's more of like also a separate issue, right? I think that's more of like the media glorifying school shootings, and then people having this, famous complex where they are nobodies and they want to be small towns and they want to be famous. Like, those are different, complex, separate issues, because these school shootings, guns have been around for hundreds of years, just been around for a couple of decades in the rapid manner that they're happening in. So I think, these are all separate, very important issues that need to be spoken about, need to be discussed, and need to be hashed out. You shouldn't restrict, in my opinion, you should not restrict any medical cannabis user or any cannabis user from any of their bill of rights for any reason. That is just not valid. It's not valid if I have an ailment that cannabis helps me function or not suffer, and then I can't have my gun now. I can't protect my family. I can't be in a rural area where I hunt or do any of those things. Like, this is just madness. This is not how the Constitution was originally intended. This is not what our framers meant, and this is not what many people even intend today. So when we get these situations mixed up, right, we get a confluence of a lot of issues and really hot topics, and then we don't really get to drill down on what the real issues are of each subject. So I feel like when we're able to separate them out, then we can drill down and say what's what. I mean,
yeah, we're moving away from freedom.
Mm-hmm.
We should have less rules and not more rules. And if you claim to be about freedom, you claim to be about individual rights, yet you're willing to trade something that you don't agree with politically with something that you claim to be 100% against on the other end. Nah, man, it doesn't have to be tit for tat.
Mm-hmm.
Do the right thing.
Yeah.
Instead of weed for the people or weed for warriors, now people have to choose between weed or weapons, and it's an unfair construct for those who might need or choose to use medical cannabis to jeopardize their right to keep and bear arms. And so you're right, Luke, instead of mixing the melting pot of issues, because there are, guns and access to guns, and the conversation around guns is a hot button topic these days because of all the stuff that we see in the news, because of all the tragedies, because of all the unnecessary loss. But you're right. If we boil this down, why should anybody have to have their constitutional rights diluted for any reason? And Rico, you're absolutely correct. Our country is moving away from liberties and personal freedoms and choice to layer upon layer upon layer of restriction, complication, and a lack of logic. And this is a great example of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys on this, and I'm going to even say that Representative Kevin Jensen, you are not a true Republican. You are not about freedom. You are about restriction, and the fact that you are motioning against the Second Amendment, I'd even encourage the NRA to look at their funding for your campaign. And on that,
NRA's hold on. NRA's funding something. NRA ain't got no money. What you talking about, Jason?
NRA got all the money, bro. Don't get it twisted. They got deep pockets.
No money, man.
They got deep pockets, bro. Deep pockets.
Spending that shit at Cheesecake Factory.
Oh boy. Well, coming up next,
they got an ammo box of Benjamins buried under the office.
Oh
right.
God.